Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. The neon sign outside the motel buzzed intermittently, its dim light casting a pale, flickering glow over the cracked asphalt. I leaned against my car, keeping my gaze fixed on the worn-down building. The place was a haven for those who wanted to be unseen, a fact I was intimately aware of from my weeks of undercover work. My job was to monitor the comings and goings, looking for anything that might hint at illegal activities or unsavory dealings. Tonight, however, the routine had taken an unexpected turn. I spotted Clara's familiar sedan creeping into the lot. A cold knot tightened in my stomach as I watched her get out. Her posture was stiff, her eyes darting around nervously. I knew something was wrong the moment she glanced over her shoulder before slipping into room 12. I waited a few minutes, my heart pounding as I followed her footsteps to the door of that same room. The key card in my pocket felt heavy with the weight of what I feared to find. Quietly, I unlocked the door and slipped inside, my heart racing with each creak of the floorboards. From my vantage point, I could see Clara sitting across from a man I had never seen before. He was tall, with a sharp suit that seemed to scream authority, even in the dim light. The way he carried himself was commanding, and there was something unsettling about the way he leaned forward, his eyes piercing through the dim light. I tried to catch snippets of their conversation, but the thin curtains obscured most of the details. Clara was fidgeting, her fingers twisting in her lap as she spoke in a low, anxious voice. "Clara," the man said, his tone smooth but edged with an undercurrent of menace. "You've been quite a disappointment. I expected you to handle this more professionally." I'm doing my best," Clara stammered, her voice shaking. "It's not easy with everything that's been happening." The man's smile was cold. "You know what happens when people disappoint me, don't you?" My blood ran cold. The fear in Clara's voice was palpable, and the man's words were laced with threats. I wanted to burst in there, to confront them both, but I knew it wasn't the right moment. I had to understand the full picture before making a move. I stepped back, careful not to make any noise, and returned to my car, my mind racing. I had to find out who this man was and why Clara was involved with him. The feeling of betrayal cut deeper than I had expected. The woman I loved was entangled in something far more dangerous than I had imagined, and I had to protect her, even if it meant putting myself at risk. I reached for my phone, dialing Mel's number with a sense of urgency. The line rang twice before he picked up. "Mel, it's me. I need your help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Clara's in trouble. She's with a man named Mark Jensen at the motel." There was a pause on the other end, and Mel's voice came back, laced with concern. "Jensen? That's a big name in the shadows. I'll dig into it, but you need to be careful. If Jensen's involved, things could get dangerous fast." "Thanks, Mel," I said, my voice tight with anxiety. "I need to know everything you can find out about him." As I hung up, I felt a sinking dread. The next steps were crucial. I needed answers, and I had to act quickly to protect Clara from the sinister web she was caught in. I walked into Mel's office, a modest room cluttered with cleaning supplies and old magazines. Mel was busy scrubbing the floor, his movements practiced and methodical. When he saw me, he set aside his mop and wiped his hands on a rag. "Hey, what's got you in such a hurry?" Mel asked, his brows furrowing with concern. I pulled up a chair and sat down, my anxiety barely contained. "It's about Clara. I saw her with a guy named Mark Jensen at the motel last night. He's someone I've heard whispers about, powerful, dangerous. I need to know more about him." Mel's eyes widened slightly. "Jensen, huh? That's not a name you want to mess with. He's got connections in some pretty high places. What's Clara doing with him?" "I don't know all the details yet," I said, rubbing my temples. "But from what I saw, she's clearly scared. Jensen's got her wrapped up in something, and I need to find out what." Mel nodded thoughtfully, then reached into his drawer and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "I've got a contact who might be able to help." Valerie, she's a private investigator. Knows a lot about shady characters and has resources I don't. You should talk to her. I took the paper from Mel, noting the name and phone number scribbled on it. Thanks, Mel. I appreciate it. I'll give her a call. After leaving Mel's office, I drove to Valerie's office. It was located in a less than reputable part of town, but I had learned not to judge a book by its cover. The building was old but maintained, with a small sign that read Valerie Winters, Private Investigator. I walked up the stairs and knocked on her office door. Valerie's voice called out from inside, a mix of authority and curiosity. Come in. The room was cluttered but organized in its own way. Files and photographs were strewn across her desk, while a large map covered one wall, marked with various notes and connections. Valerie herself was mid-40s, with a sharp gaze and a demeanor that suggested she didn't suffer fools lightly. Mr. Adams, I presume, she said, looking up from her desk as I entered. Mel gave me a call. Have a seat. I sat down, taking a deep breath. I'm looking for information on a man named Mark Jensen. My wife, Clara, has gotten mixed up with him, and I need to understand what's going on. Mel said you might be able to help. Valerie's expression grew serious. Jensen is a name I've run across. He's involved in some pretty unsavory stuff, human trafficking, organized crime. If your wife is involved, she's likely a victim, not a perpetrator. A cold shiver ran down my spine. That's what I feared. What can you tell me about him? I need to know how deep this goes and how I can protect Clara. Valerie leaned back in her chair, considering her next words carefully. Jensen is a manipulator. He targets people who are vulnerable or desperate, using them to further his own interests. From what I know, he's very skilled at covering his tracks. If Clara's involved, she's probably been coerced or threatened. Is there any way to find out more about his current activities? I asked, my voice edged with urgency. I can start digging, Valerie said, picking up a pen and jotting down some notes. I'll need to run background checks, look into recent transactions, and see if there are any connections that might lead us to his current operations. It's going to take time, but I'll keep you updated. Thank you, Valerie, I said, standing up. I'll do whatever it takes to keep Clara safe. Just let me know what I can do to help. As I left her office, I felt a mix of hope and dread. Valerie's expertise gave me a glimmer of optimism, but the danger was far from over. I had to remain vigilant, protect Clara, and work with Valerie to untangle the web of deceit and danger that had ensnared my wife. The days following my meeting with Valerie were a whirlwind of anxiety and anticipation. Each night, I would return to the motel, trying to catch any glimpse of Clara or Jensen, but nothing seemed to change. Then, one morning, I received a call from Valerie that would alter everything. Mr. Adams, we need to talk, Valerie said, her voice tense and urgent. Can you come by my office? I arrived at Valerie's office, my heart pounding with unease. The room was filled with the usual clutter, but today, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Valerie was already seated at her desk, papers and documents spread out before her. Sit down, she said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. I've uncovered some disturbing information. I took a seat, trying to steady my breathing. What did you find out? Valerie's eyes met mine with a mixture of sympathy and gravity. Mark Jensen is not just a criminal, he's a master manipulator. He preys on people who are vulnerable or in dire circumstances. It turns out, Clara is one of his targets. I felt a chill run through me. What do you mean? How did this happen? Jensen uses a network of coercion and threats to control his victims, Valerie explained, pulling out a series of documents and photographs. He finds people who are already struggling, financially, emotionally, or otherwise, and uses that vulnerability against them. Clara's involvement isn't by choice, she's been trapped by his schemes. I leaned forward, trying to process the information. But why her? How did she get mixed up with him? Valerie pointed to a photograph of Clara and Jensen. I've traced some of Clara's recent contacts and financial records. It appears she was initially approached with an offer for a job that seemed legitimate. But once she was involved, Jensen started applying pressure, threatening her with harm to herself or people she cares about. It's classic psychological manipulation. So, she's been scared into compliance, I said, feeling a mix of anger and guilt. I've been seeing her as the problem when she's actually the victim. Exactly, Valerie confirmed. Jensen is dangerous, and he's not above using violence to get what he wants. I'm working on a plan to gather more evidence and take him down, but you need to be very careful. He's likely aware that someone's investigating him. What can I do to help? I asked, my resolve hardening. I need to protect Clara. Keep a low profile and stay out of sight, Valerie advised. I'm going to need your cooperation to collect evidence, but for now, the best thing you can do is stay safe. I'll handle the investigation and keep you updated. As I left Valerie's office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Clara was in more danger than I had realized, and it was my responsibility to help her navigate this perilous situation. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was determined to confront Jensen and end his reign of terror. Later that day, I went to the motel, hoping to catch a glimpse of Clara. I found her sitting alone outside room 12, her eyes red and puffy. I approached cautiously, not wanting to alarm her. Clara, I said softly, sitting beside her. I know you're scared, but I'm here to help. She looked at me with a mixture of relief and apprehension. I didn't know who else to turn to. Jensen, he's been threatening me. I thought I was going to lose everything. We're going to get through this, I reassured her. I'm working with a private investigator who's helping me gather evidence against Jensen. We're close to taking him down, but I need you to stay strong and keep a low profile for now. Clara nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know, I said, squeezing her hand gently. We'll get through this together. With a heavy heart and a steely resolve, I set out to support Valerie's investigation and protect Clara from the shadows that threatened to consume her. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, would do whatever it took to see justice served and ensure Clara's safety. The raid was set for early morning, the hush of the pre-dawn hours adding to the tension. Valerie and I had coordinated with local law enforcement, preparing to strike against Mark Jensen's operation. The plan was straightforward but risky: hit the motel where Jensen was hiding, gather evidence, and arrest him before he could escape. I stood with Valerie near the command center, where officers were finalizing their preparations. The air was thick with anticipation and the occasional clatter of equipment. I felt a mix of adrenaline and dread, knowing that today would change everything. Everything is in place, Valerie said, checking her watch. We'll move in at 0600. Are you ready for this? I nodded, my jaw set. I've never been more ready. I want to make sure Jensen pays for what he's done. As the clock inched closer to the designated time, I tried to calm my nerves. I knew that Clara would be safe for now, hidden away from Jensen's reach. My focus was on ensuring the raid went off without a hitch. At exactly 0600, a series of commands rang out, and officers began to move into position. I followed Valerie and a team of officers to the motel. The operation was swift and precise. Law enforcement breached the door, and the sound of shouted orders filled the air. Inside room 12, Jensen was caught off guard, his eyes widening as he realized what was happening. I watched from a safe distance as officers restrained him, his face a mask of surprise and fury. Mark Jensen, you're under arrest, an officer declared, his voice firm. Jensen struggled briefly, but it was clear he was no match for the combined force of law enforcement. As he was led away in handcuffs, a feeling of grim satisfaction washed over me. The man who had caused so much pain was finally facing justice. After the raid, Valerie and I regrouped at a nearby cafe, a quiet spot away from the chaos. The aftermath of the operation had left me exhausted but hopeful. Clara had been informed of the raid and was waiting for me at home, her anxiety palpable. Good work today, Valerie said, offering a rare smile. We got the evidence we needed, and Jensen won't be causing any more harm. Thank you, Valerie, I said, my voice heavy with gratitude. I couldn't have done this without your help. Just doing my job, she replied modestly. But remember, this is just the beginning. There's still a lot to sort out, and Clara will need support as she deals with the fallout. When I arrived home, Clara was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. The sight of her filled me with a deep sorrow, but also a renewed determination to help her heal. Clara, I said softly, walking over to her. It's over. Jensen's been arrested, and we can finally start to move forward. She looked up at me, her expression a mix of relief and regret. I'm so sorry for everything. I never wanted to drag you into this. I was just trying to protect myself. I understand, I said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. You were caught in a terrible situation, and it wasn't your fault. We'll get through this together. Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. I just want to put all of this behind us and start fresh. I want that too, I said, squeezing her hand reassuringly. Valerie has offered to help us with the next steps. We can rebuild our lives and work through this, one step at a time. Later, Valerie joined us at home, her presence a reminder that we weren't alone in this. She offered a plan for moving forward, including counseling and support services for Clara. This is an opportunity for a new beginning, Valerie said, her voice gentle but firm. You both have a chance to rebuild and heal. It won't be easy, but you have each other, and that's a strong foundation to start from. As Valerie left, Clara and I looked at each other, a mix of apprehension and hope in our eyes. The road ahead was uncertain, but the darkness of the past was slowly lifting. We had a chance to rebuild our lives and find a path forward together. With the weight of the past few weeks beginning to lift, I felt a cautious optimism. Clara and I had faced a harrowing ordeal, but we were ready to confront the future together. The journey to healing and rebuilding would be long, but we were committed to facing it side by side.